Alright, so I want to explain my round leave elo compensation system that I created on Photoshop and just how it works. Because today my friends were playing in a 4 stack, right? No, a 3 stack, sorry. And they came across a bought level 9 account that left halfway through the game, and they got practically no elo compensation for that. And since the board account was level 9, they were doing terrible, and they weren't playing to their skill level, and that made it just even worse for them. So I want to come up with a system that sort of helps that a little bit more. So pretty much, let x equal the round leave counter, right? So the round leave counter, pretty much once a person leaves the game, it starts this counter, right? So the next round that they're not in the game, not the round they left on, but the next round, it adds 1 to the counter if they don't join by the time the bye phase has ended. And so every single round that accumulates, that counter adds up. And if they come back, that counter stops. They leave, it starts again. So on and so forth. Now, let y equal the total number of rounds that game. So, say for example, 26 rounds were played that game, y would equal 26, right? So, let z equal the ADR of the lever. Now, with the ADR, I've converted it to a decimal number, and you'll see why in a second. And now let f equal the amount of elo normally gained / lost that game. So the amount of elo that is normally counted, like at the beginning of the game, before they even enter the game and start fighting each other. And so if, say for example, it's a bunch of level 1s versus a bunch of level 10s, that normal elo gain / loss would be 50. Now, the elo handicap will be assigned to 5 players. Technically, you don't need the 5th player, because if 5 people leave, that's already a loss, but we'll just say that anyway. So, the letters A to E will equal that, and pretty much each letter from A to E will be this whole equation system I show you, and will be added together at the end of the game. So say for example 2 people leave, A plus B will be added, and that will determine the final elo handicap. So if somehow one person wins against the other 5 people, or however many people are on the other team, they'll get the elo compensation from A, B, C, and D. Now, first you need to determine whether the person is most likely not throwing or is throwing. So to do that, you get the ADR of the person, and you check if it's equal to 100 or greater. And if it's equal to 100 or greater, you get the ADR of the lever in decimal form, which is 0.001 times their ADR in game. So for example, their ADR is 120. You times it by 0.001, and then you use it in the equation I'll show you in a second. Now, if the ADR is less than 100, which more likely means they are throwing, I know there's a report system that you can use, but in case somehow that doesn't go through, this is just a backup. So if the ADR is less than 100, then the Z is equal to the ADR in game over 100 plus 1. So say for example their ADR is 50 in game, you put it over 100 and plus by 1, and that will equal 1.5, and then you put into this equation. So let's go with the top path first. So if their ADR is over 100, you times it by, let me get my calculator out real quick. And so let's say their ADR is 120, for example. Times it by 0.001, and that will equal 0.12. So now what you do in this equation, you get the total number of rounds that game. So the rounds they left, so 12 over the rounds that were played, so 26, and then you times it by the amount of elo gained normally. So let's say, for example, that's 25, so it's just a very fair match, right? So 25 elos gained from that match, and then you times it by the Z, which is calculated here. So in this case, we got 0.12. So we times it by 0.12 if you're doing the top path where the ADR is over 100. And then that will equal 1.38 elo compensation. And you can just round it to 1 or whatever you believe. Now, say for example now, the bottom path where the person is potentially throwing. Now what you can do here is, let's say for example the ADR is again 50, you do 50 over 100 plus 1, that will equal 1.5, then you do the equation again, so let's say for example 12 over 26 times 25, and then you times it by 1.5. That will give you 17 elo compensation. That's quite a bit if the person is throwing and they've left for a substantial amount of rounds, because they weren't very useful that game. And so, say for example, you do that whole system again, and let's say B is equal to 11, because 2 people leave, so 17 plus 11, that's 28 elo compensation. Okay, so I came to the realization there that you could actually overcap the amount of elo handicap you get. So say for example you win 25 elo off one game, and the elo handicap is 28, and you lose that game. You're now losing literally 0 elo, which makes 0 sense. So what I did to solve this is, if I just make this smaller, sorry. Now, if you just times this by 1 over 4, and you also make this just up to D, that solves it, and then you times. Now let me explain what I did there. So pretty much that just lowers the amount of elo handicap made for each player, right? And that way you can't over handicap someone so they lose no elo from that game at all. And pretty much the final elo handicap though will be very low. You'd only get 3 or 4 elo from one person. So to solve that, I just times it by 2, so it gives a bit more of a significant increase. You could play around with that number, it could be like 1.5 or whatever you want, or even higher, but just so it's a significant increase. So instead of like 3 or 4 elo, you'd get like maybe 8 or 12 or even 16 elo compensation. So just something fair and like helpful for you. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to explain.